Welcome back to Microsoft Virtual Academy. Do you know what I mean? Means to hack Jumpstart. My name is Steven. This is Helen.
Hey guys.
And so last time we left off, we had created a AngularJS front end for Chirp, our Twitter clone. And the last module, I walked through Nodejs and Express on how to create those APIs and get those things worked out for mimicking how we would make posts, and we actually did implement the authentication. So this module is all about the M of Beanstalk, which is MongoDB. So MongoDB is our data store that we're going to use. So if you remember the last module, we actually went ahead and used an in-memory store, and that's just a temporary solution. So what we're going to do is actually swap that out with MongoDB. So for this module, we're going to talk about intro document-oriented databases, just really a quick overview of that, what MongoDB is, how to use MongoDB from Node.js, which will flow right into how we can implement those route handlers for the post APIs to manipulate individual posts. Okay. So first of all, so document-oriented databases literally look like JSON objects. This might be kind of similar to if you would expect rows or columns in a traditional table or tabular data store and SQL databases. Instead, MongoDB just has documents. So here's the documents that we'll actually be using for this actual application for Chirp. So we'll have user documents, we'll have post documents. User documents represent a user, and of course, post documents represent a cheap. And we'll use these as our structures in our data store. Now, we do have a full Microsoft Virtual Academy on document-oriented databases that you can go ahead and take a look at if you'd like to get more detailed information. This module will more so talk about how to quickly use MongoDB to integrate it to our application to get things going very quickly. So that's our document-oriented database, like 100-mile-per-hour overview. That was very fast. There's a lot more to it, but. And now, so MongoDB is a popular open source implementation of a document-oriented database. It's fully managed on Azure via MongoLab, which is a third-party provider, which is just an add-on in your Azure portal, which is really neat. That way you don't have to worry about like having to update MongoDB or any type of patches. It'll just kind of come down for you. And the drivers basically in most languages that people code in, there's a driver for it. There's a C++ driver, a Node.js driver, there's a Python driver, a C# driver. Pretty much every language I could think of has a driver for MongoDB.
Yeah, and the great thing about the MongoLab instance for on Azure is that you can actually use a small one for completely free, right? Yeah,
so on Azure, you could actually spin up a MongoLab instance. And we'll do that on the last module of the day when we tie everything up and launch it to the cloud. And you could have a free instance that actually doesn't cost you anything. So with that, with a free website, you could get up and running for nothing on Azure, which is pretty nice. Okay, so MongoDB comes with a few binaries that you should be aware of when you install. It's the MongoDB, the database process, Mongo, the MongoDB CLI, which is really just a way for us to manage our database, and Mongo import, which is a data import utility. We only use the first two ones for this lab, but if you're interested in how to use like more of those Mongo utilities, go ahead and take a look at our on-demand MongoDB Jumpstart that we filmed in last January, and I believe went live for on-demand in last month. Okay. So we talked about MongoDB document-oriented databases. So now how do we use MongoDB from Node.js to, because we need to do that if we're going to implement those route handlers. So the first thing we're going to do is, so you can either decide to use the ODM, which is Object Data Mapper, or we can just use MongoDB driver by itself. The Object Data Mapper is pretty nice because it wraps up MongoDB and it actually enforces schemas. You might be familiar with SQL. If you are, SQL kind of naturally enforces a schema. MongoDB does not, which is one of the great things about it, but it's also a double-edged sword because if you're not actually enforcing any type of schemas, things can go crazy because you could just put whatever, and documents don't necessarily have to look like each other. It's just by convention you keep those. So Mongoose actually enforces those conventions for you, and you'll see what I mean in a bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just do an npm install mongoose, and we'll save that to our package.json, and that will allow us to go ahead and start using MongoDB. So I'll jump into my command line and actually go ahead and do that. So I already have our module 4 start directory open in our GitHub repository. So I'll do npm install mongoose. So mongoose has a dependency on a MongoDB library. So if you see here, so we don't actually need to download the driver because mongoose just uses the driver under it. So that's actually pretty nice. Okay, so we've installed it and we're kind of ready to go. If we want to go ahead and require it, we can go ahead and put it in our app.js, which is var mongoose equals require mongoose, and we'll connect to MongoDB. Let me make sure I'm following my slides here. Yeah, so with the MongoDB driver, we don't really need to talk about too much. You can use it directly, but we'll just use the driver through Mongoose. And it allows us to create, modify, and delete, insert, CRUD operations on records. So to connect to MongoDB, we'll just connect to a local MongoDB server, which will be, what is it? MongoDB localhost.
I think you'll need to do mongoose.connect to connect.
Connect, yeah. There we go. MongoDB. What's the port number, Helen? It's 271.102? The default port
something
number?
like that, yeah.
I'll check in a second. And then we'll pick the name of the database we're going to use. So we'll call it chirp test. Okay, so this connects us to our MongoDB database, which will be running locally. Now, the thing you might ask is, hey, how do I, get MongoDB running? So to do that, after you install MongoDB, depending on where you installed it, it's actually set up on my path variable. So wherever you installed it, just go MongoD. And if you start it for the first time, it will complain about the data directory. So you might have to place the data directory where it asks for. You can also just do MongoD and do db path to data directory, and which is just where MongoDB will store its on this data. But if I have everything set up, I can just do MongoD. Let's see. Oh, I think another database is actually running already. Yeah, this crazy looking screen. There we go. Okay, so it says, hey, waiting for connections on port 27017, which is the default MongoDB port. So 27017. Thank you. Okay, so now we've connected to, this will connect us to our MongoDB server. So now we're kind of set up to use MongoDB with Node. And what we'll do with the Mongoose ODM is that it'll enforce schemas around our MongoDB database using schemas, and then the schemas will be able to use models. And the way it works is that MongoDB has collections. Documents go into collections, and collections go into databases. Databases live on servers. And so for every model or schema, there's a one-to-one relationship between a model and a collection. So if I have a post model, I'll have a post plural collection. If I have a user model, I'll have a users collection. So that's kind of how that works. So let's go ahead and talk about how we can implement the route handler with Node.js and MongoDB. So if you remember from the previous lab, we actually just did a quick to-do implementation. We never actually implemented everything. Now we're actually going to get the user documents for GET request and create a user document for POST request. So really, it just means, hey, if we want to create the CRUD operations on those APIs that we didn't implement before. So we got the authentication working, but now we need to do the implementation. So we'll go ahead and get started. So let me minimize this out. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually jump into our authenticate JS here. Let me pull up my GitHub repository for it so I could follow my README. So if we go to chirp, module 4. So we already started MongoDB. and we already installed Mongoose. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and create our models.js, and we're going to use models.js to create our schemas. So I'm going to create a new folder here, we'll call it models.